Okay, so we'll talk about Unit 1. I didn't pick a certain book for this class because the materials, yes, you can buy a CH book or a Pentest Plus study guide, that's okay. We're going to try to provide you with the test out package, which includes the book. The notes is pulled from various books that I have used and also resources from NIST and different websites that you can access also online. But today we're going to talk about ethical hacking, different attack faces, and also footprinting. That's what we're going to be doing. So in the first area here of your notes, it talks about ethical hacking. A lot of times when I do presentations to high school or other people that's interested in the cybersecurity program, I talk about ethical hacking, and they usually don't know what that is. So it's just you are performing the task similar to an attacker. You're gonna determine the vulnerabilities of your system, network devices, right? Applications, sometimes that could be software, and having a point of view of an attacker. But the difference between us and the attacker, the malicious attacker, is that we provide a thorough report of how to fix the problem. So at the end, you're going to determine what kind of issues that you're looking at, the vulnerabilities, the threats, and be able to build out security solutions. So you are going to be able to implement solutions that's going to prevent future breaches. Let's say that a company has gone through a breach, right? And they need a pen tester or a consultant to come in. And you should not start doing anything until everything is legally reviewed and signed, right? Normally, when you sign, you should also have a witness because this area can be gray and it can cause a lot of legal problems. Never do anything as a favor for a friend or someone you know without having proper signature and agreement. Okay. So if someone say, "Hey, can you take a look at my husband, my wife, my girlfriend's phone?" I suspect, right? That's red flag right away. Say no. I would do this professionally, but unless we have an agreement in some form, because that person can turn around and sue you, right? So we want to make sure that we are responsible and we want to make sure that we cover our back. So we sometimes this can be national security and we'll talk about the grid and all the resources as a nation and nation state attack and so on. So in ethical hacking, we want to make sure that we are performing real world assessment in looking at the vulnerabilities and the threats and be able to derive a solution, but at the same time, following ethical guidelines. So for the first question, it asks you to explain. Can you see this? Should I zoom in some larger? Okay. Okay, let me know if it's too small. It asks you to explain why ethical hacking is important in an organization. And that could be public sector or private sector. Let's say you work for the Department of Defense, right? And you have to perform these tasks, or you work for the bank. And let me fix the zoom real quick. Let's make it 180. A little better. And to determine the type of issues that they might have, the vulnerability with their online, the web application, or a user to transfer money, or to be able to access their account. And it could be in different areas, right? So ethical hacking allows the organization to find security vulnerabilities. Those are weaknesses. So that could be an application that has security flaws, right? All developers now have to go through security training about how to better develop. And when you put your app up on Google Play or Apple Market, right? They check for that. They check for the security components of the app. But on the back end, if we're tying our app to the servers, like web servers, data storage, and so on, we have to also take a look at that. You guys probably hear about, TikTok and how TikTok is managing the data and so on. There's concern about where that data goes and how protected your data, right? As you see, if you're in different part of the world, the requirements, the legal requirements are different, right? In the United States, we have specific requirements on how private information for the user, the customer, the company is needed. And then also you look at the state, like California is different than other states too. So for the business, it's beneficial to have ethical hacking practices, right? Or individual professionals that go in and perform ethical hacking or pen testing, because they are going to be able to determine what they need to fix, what kind of issues they might be facing, what potential attack that they might be looking at down the line, right? In the industry, we say it's not about if it's going to happen, it's about when someone's going to attack you, right? And ultimately, that's going to give them the protection of assets, their system, their people, right? Money. Because if they invest in their workers, their engineers, their employees, they want to be able to protect the information for the workers as well, along with the customer. And we want to be more proactive in security solutions. That means that you always continue to improve. And this is why cybersecurity is always in demand. No matter what you have as technology, there's always going to be flaw in technology design or integration, right? There's no perfect model anywhere. Okay? So if people tell you, oh, I have the perfect software, they're lying, right? If I have the perfect computer, even if with quantum systems and what you see, it might be fast and powerful, but there's always the next iteration that's better, don't you think? Or a different design. And everybody, a group of engineers is different than the next group of engineers. So design is always going to have flaws. So what you see is we always want to be proactive in how we can improve procedures. Those are the steps that you do to have protection and to make sure that you have good reputation. You know that it's important, right? Like for business, especially for e-commerce, social media, reputation is important because once people found out that, so-and-so is reached, likely that they might not return and provide to keep on the relationship as business or and customer. So if you hear things like T-Mobile has been attacked, right? Or even banks have been jeopardized, there's concern with the customer and they might lose business that way. Okay, so let's talk about the different areas of attack. So earlier I mentioned to you that there's networks, right? That consists of systems that are connected, and that could be from wireless to the wired network. Almost all business have some form of wireless network, and that area is usually available to the people, the customer, the client, the visitor. Let's say that you look at the hospital, you're going to have a public Wi-Fi area for the visitor and even the patient that's there. But there's protected area in the hospital where you would have private wireless network for the nurses, the doctors, the staff that works at the hospital. And then we also need to block wireless signal in a hospital because it jeopardizes the radio frequency for MRI machines and so on, right? So what you see is a network can be complex or it can be simple. And then everybody has web application. When you open your phone today, all of those apps that you have on your phone, that's web apps, right? You're able to sync your data when you take pictures. You can do voice call, right? As a voice over IP using the network, but all those apps store your data and it puts your data onto the server and you can retrieve it at any time. So that means that we also need to take a look at how the application is communicating with the server, how the codes are written, and is there a way that someone can jeopardize the application? That's on centralized area, right? So we'll take a look at that down the line. I'll show you how you can set up like web servers and then also tying the other server with that through virtual machines. And then the human side, I think that we will never get 100% because of this area, right? People will falter. As you know that the advance in social engineering is changing, right? They always improving and looking at ways to get people to do something or to get people to donate money or give them something and so on. And then we talked about the physical security that could pertain to building, door locks, right? Surveillance, and so on. So when you're looking at airport transportation system, this is critical. Because imagine, right, this is why we have to go through like all of that check to get on the airplane, the security check. But all of the people at the airport, imagine LAX at 5 p.m., right? How many flights are coming in and out? How many people are dropping off their loved ones and picking them up, right? You have to protect those people along with buildings and conferences and so on. So physical security is a big area. So when you go to Cal State San Bernardino, they have a program for national security, and it really addressed like how integration of government protection to the national grid and the national resources, right? So that will be the concern. And it really depends on what area you work in and the industry you work in, right? But some of the main focal points is going to be the same across, okay? So we want to protect our assets, people, system, right? Investment, okay? And it tells you here that these areas are targeted by attacker. You must assess this as an ethical hazard. But let's say that you are contracted to only do sub area of this. Might be they only want, maybe you work with a team and your scope is only wireless or your scope is only physical, right? So that's where we're going to operate. Now, can you be hired to do all of it? It won't be in 1 week or, it might not be able to achieve in a short period of time, but you'll be able to assess it over time, right? Maybe, so normally when you do this, it's normally operated as a team. And even if you work as a consultant, it will be difficult for someone individually to just address all of this all at once in a short period of time. And so ultimately, we want to be able to give the organization the report of how to better secure, right, their assets and their credibility. Any question? Okay. So where can I find this information, right, that Dr. Nguyen has been talking about? So I gave you some statistic over here. And then, so this was gathered, I think a year or two back, but this was done through survey and also data analysis. And then the areas of attack is identified here. So the areas of attack, right, those could be like, it would contain the targets, right? So like, for example, network would consist of systems or endpoint devices as well, and appliances. But now what we're going to do is we are going to go through the stages or the phases of attack. So what are the phases that one would need to go through to perform pen testing, or what the attacker would go through? Now, when you read different textbook, and this is why sometimes it's all like different. Some model is going to have longer steps, right? 13, 12, 11. And then you have some industry practice type of model that's, less or more, right? But ultimately, it should become natural to you if you want to do this, right? How do I go from point A to point B to do this job, right? Where do I start? What do I look for? Also, it's important that you are resourceful. You have to think outside of the box sometimes, because in this industry, it's very normal for pen testing that you thought you went 3 steps ahead, right? Let's say that I gather intelligence, I did my homework, I got like 3 pages on this company I'm contracted with, and I'm gonna try to get into their network through their, I wrote down all the notes, right? And then when you started doing it, you have blocks, right? You can't. So it's like you have to get to that point, but if you are on your way there and you're having blocks, you have to find alternate ways. So the more knowledge you have, the more skills, the more tools you have, right? And the more creative you are, sometimes can be useful. So that really entails in planning. Okay, so in planning, we are going to identify, right, what we need. Okay, that means that we're going to gather intelligence. You can Google and find a lot of information about someone or something or a company, right? We're going to perform some footprinting techniques. That is just basically gathering information about a certain target. That could be a system, a network. So let me ask you this. If I need to find your computer at home today, what do I need to look for? I'm sorry, IP address. Where can I find that? See how networking is important? So an IP address is tied to the computer because that's how you can communicate. You have an IP address for your phone, right? Your smartphone. You have an IP address when you connect it to the network, right? So when you're inside the network, you have a private IP. But once you leave your router, your local area network, going into Spectrum, Frontier, AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, you have a public IP. All your devices at home share that one public IP, right? Can I find your public IP? If I'm connected to your wireless network, I will find your public IP. I can also scan your devices to find your public IP, right? And then I can also find your private IP, okay? So that's what you have to think about. How can I find the information and where do I start in this thing, okay? If I need to find what kind of system that company has, right? Where do I start? Maybe someone posts something online, social media. Maybe I can Google that company information. Maybe I can use a tool to find maybe their network layout or their network communication or their network packets, right? Because the network packets contain which system is sending, which system is not, right? And that can help you map out, oh, there are these type of servers in these devices and so on. Okay? All right. Okay, so it talks about footprinting. There will be final and quiz questions on this, so make sure that we look at that. And before we look at the questions and answer, I wanted to kind of give you the breakdown. The difference between active footprinting and passive footprinting. Okay, so an active footprinting is when you scan a system, right? Let's say that I run Nmap, which is a tool that looks for open ports, and ports are like windows and doors. So imagine that I need to get into your home, and I know that you have a window that's open in the back, or maybe your back door is open, or your front door is open. And how do I do that? I can use a tool like an Nmap to scan, and it will tell me, oh, that system has 3 ports open, 3 doors and windows open. That's where I'm going to find. So I will make notes of that, and I would say, okay, I'm going to try to get into those doors and windows, right? So active footprinting is when you are targeting that system and scanning that system, right? But remember, if you scan that system will see you. So the alarm will go off, right? It's not stealth. There are very few tools that stealth, because ultimately we designed a computer to call back home, right? To report back, right? Otherwise, you don't have two-way communication. So if I reach out to it, I have to receive something back to see the report, right? So active footprinting is going to, the other system is gonna see you as you see it. So if you wanna be stealth, you first have to do passive as much as you can. And then you might have like, a way to be stealth. You have to match your IP or, and so on, okay? But a lot of times they're gonna see you, right? So can they monitor and see that you are looking at their information? Sure, there are tools to also do that. So passive footprinting is just gathering information by not directly targeting that system. So I can use a search engine to look for it. I can call someone to ask for information about it, right? Sometimes that can be phishing, sometimes that can just be like, oh, I heard about this company that, your brother works for. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? So you can cross-reference and then you can gather some data. Is that, you just gotta make sure that you dilute it to be accurate. So some of the tools that you can use, Maltego is really good. So I listed, and you have the links here. We will be using Recon NG, and Harvester and some of these tools. So Spiderfoot as well. So yeah, there are tools that are built because the people who came before you, they said, this is too cumbersome. We'll just write an application that will be able to do that for you. Or even a website, right? Okay, so let's answer these. So for the first phase, and you can copy and paste it, but this is what I put down. So describe the first phase of pen testing. What techniques are used in this phase? Why is this phase important in security assessment? So the first phase consists of planning and reconnaissance, or recon. The goals of this phase is to first help you identify the tools that you need, and you'll be able to strategize what you will do next to find the vulnerability. So in this phase, you're not really finding a lot of vulnerabilities yet. You're trying to get information about the system and how you'll be able to put together a list of tools that you can find additional information like vulnerabilities and resources for the attacks. So the techniques in this phase include information gathering, that's called intelligence gathering, discovery of systems and networks through footprinting. So after today, right, let's say you apply for a job and they're interested in hiring you to do some pen testing, you can impress them by saying some of these terms. Like you can say that while I don't have much experience in pen testing, I have, let's say you have a certification, but, I've used these type of tools for footprinting. Okay? And you can go on for a few minutes about what you've been doing. Any questions? So I hope that when you write this down, right, that's going to help you remember. And you should go back and review for it as you study for the quiz and the final, and also prepare for your job and get into the field, right? It's not just about busy work. It's about helping you. If you see it, type it, right? And then go back and review it. It will help you remember. And that's my technique. Okay, so next we're going to talk about active and passive footprinting. Is that okay? If I scroll down too far, let me know. Okay, so question 4 asks you describe the difference between active and passive footprinting techniques. What type of tools are used in each footprinting technique? So we learned earlier that active footprinting is a way to gather information by directly targeting certain systems or object or subject. And active footprinting, you can use tools that falls in the category of port scanner. You can do a ping sweep. You can also do DNS queries. DNS queries, so domain name service is for the servers that are connected to your web server. So when you visit the .com, like google.com, youtube.com, right, tiktok.com, the first server that sees you, that receives your request, is the web server. But without the DNS, right, that web server will have actually not an important tool, right? So in order to access that web page, the web server serves you the page. But the domain exists because of the DNS. The .com, right? The .org, .edu. So when we can do DNS queries, and I kind of sometimes they would gather as much information as on the DNS. You know, you always hear about redirection, right? If they poison the target, the records of the DNS, they can redirect it. So let's say that, you know, you get that phishing thing and you click the link, you thought you go to that website, but it sends your data to another site, right? Or if it's an actual site, they have to poison the record, so they modify the record of the real DNS and then plug in their own server, and that's how they redirect. And then you got the passive footprinting. We talk about that. That's something that you can use the search engine for. We hear the term Google dorking, right? That's just searching on the search engine about the object or the subject. You can also look into social media. And then dumpster diving been around for a long time, right? But people still do it because, you know, there might be important documents or things that are thrown into the trash, and that can be gathered. Like SD cards, USBs, stuff like that. Any question? Yes.
So we're talking like, they could be accessed through like even just like the USB ports. We can probably like send something in to check the port videos.
Yeah, so if you can also, yeah, that can be a physical text too, right? You might have heard of the rubber ducky. Rubber ducky is provided by Hack5, but there are other, you know, tutorials and tools out there. So it looks like a regular USB. And on the, if you buy the rubber ducky, it gives you the casing and the board that goes into the USB casing. The chip that goes on it is specialized, right? That's why it's a lot more expensive than your regular USB. If you install you follow their instructions and you install all the plugins and everything that you need for that particular hardware, you can give that to someone, and then whatever that they have typed or, you know, stored in that USB, that can be transmitted to another server or to you, or, you know, so there are ways that you can do that. Okay. You don't have to poison the DNS to redirect the information. You can entice a user to give you something on a physical storage, and then that physical storage would then use the computer to communicate. So it would, you know, you would have to embed some kind of link on there and you know, API plugin to authenticate to your server and send it. Because if you know, it could be a simple server where it receives the data and put it into the storage drive. Yeah, that can be done. Any questions? Yes. So the web server. So let's say I visit tiktok.com, right? Or that's youtube.com, that's why everybody uses YouTube. When you visit and you see the page loading, right, like all the highlights for the video, and Google does a good job with their algorithm, right? It caters to your search queries because it's always listening. And so if you search for shoes, it's gonna give you advertising for shoes first, and then, some video that you previously watched, and things like that. But the web server is what's giving you that page of all the hot videos that you should watch. Okay? It contains HTML files that gives you the page that you see. But the DNS is connected to it to resolve YouTube.com. Without the DNS, right? So when you register for a domain, you register for that name, YouTube.com. Okay? That domain name is tied to your DNS. You then would set up your DNS records for that particular domain. Now, if you pay for a hosting company, they do a lot of that in the back. But you don't officially have, like if you internally, it's a little bit different than what you have with the DNS in the domain. But all the domains in the world, right? All of that domain information, all the DNS information is stored onto a list of records. And you guys know about there are 4 people in the world that have that list. Right? My antivirus software, actually, or my security software, informed me when I was scanning. It gives me some statistic information. It was kind of interesting. So when you sign up to host like a domain, like your own website, right? Like GoDaddy or somebody that's registered for that domain, but you still have to, get your web server. So they do a lot of the back end for that for you hosting already. You don't have to install it manually because you pay someone. It's kind of like renting, a car. You just get in and drive it. You don't have to build a car, right? But if you are a sysadmin, a network admin, you have to build the car from scratch and then drive it. Okay, so you have to install the DNS role and all of that. Question? Okay, so how do I go about searching for something or someone if I want to do passive footprinting? If you're using search engine, you need to use advanced search features. We're going to practice some of it today. And then you also need to include some operators about specific information. Okay, so before you put down number 6, right? I'm going to flip back in the notes in a couple minutes. And then don't worry about putting down all the information, right? Just try to digest it. Look at the notes and then it gives you some information. And so if you're using like things like Google, you can find their operators information. There are tons of tutorials and resources also. So the query, the search items that you put into the search bar, if you include the operators and some of the advanced search feature and selecting it, it's going to be helpful with filtering out some of the information and keep some of the information that you need, right? So that means that you are going to search for things in a smarter, more logical, and efficient way. Yeah, can you just plug in whatever? Sure, but that's just going to take more time and resources. So we're going to try to do things where it is effective. Information should be effective and meeting the goals of your job, of your contract. Okay. So I'll come back to this. Give me a second, okay? Let me run down to this. So here it gives you the effective steps, and then it talks about DNS footprinting, right? We'll come back to DNS in a little bit, but normally we use NSLOOKUP and dig. Dig is, for Linux, that's useful, but NSLOOKUP is going to give you like how that domain is tied to a certain IP. And then there's cache snooping for DNS. So here it talks about server fingerprinting. All of that is usually tied to software, like version number updates, like OS releases. And then we're going to do some lab on banner grabbing. That's like the best with web server. So when you grab the banner from the web server, it's going to, because it advertises itself, it's going to tell the other system what it is. Like, let's say I run a Linux web server, it's gonna say, hey, I'm a Linux server, I have Apache services, right? So we'll see some of that. And then we'll do some web scraping. Okay. And then it talks about competitive intelligence. You guys know what this is? Looking at job listing. So if I'm targeting a company, I want to see who they're hiring. Potentially, maybe if it's like a company that has specialized design or whatever, I'll look at their engineering jobs or the designer jobs and so on. So that's gonna help me strategize on how I can attack. Do some social media, looking at the activities for online. Maltego works really well. Show for mention and then follow along. Okay, so before we get to the next stage, let's come back here. Okay, so 6, why do we cross-reference important, why is referencing important in Recon? Right? What is used for cross-referencing to gather information? So as an ethical hacker, cross-referencing is gonna validate your information. So when you gather information, you don't just gather it from one source, right? You're gonna gather it from multiple sources. So that way you can cross-reference. So make sure that it's correct and accurate. Because one website might say something, another source might say something else, and that doesn't check out. You can use OSINT tools and databases for cross-referencing. So there are resources already available for this. So what type of information can be validated on OSINT? Domain registration. Who bought or rented or, owned that domain? Like, so domain pertain to like Coca-Cola.com, Microsoft.com, right? The IP addresses associated to that domain or that's the system. Email addresses for that organization or the people who are affiliated with that organization. Social media profiles. So if you use Maltego, it's going to give you a lot of that. And then images, usually that's like public images that people post. For example, you might have an executive that has a LinkedIn profile that has some public information. It's going to pull that for you. Let's say I'm targeting Reebok.com, right? And it will find things that are affiliated with Reebok.com, maybe executives, staff, employees, things that have mentioned with that, or email addresses that are associated with that domain. So OSINT tools will give you that. And then videos and publications like YouTube videos, photos, through different engine and different social media platforms. So how can you perform footprinting effectively? And what is achieved after you complete footprinting? You need to gather as much information as you can about that case or that target. We want to make sure that that information is validated also, right? Then what you can do is you can perform some form of scanning to identify what kind of systems they have, which are the hosts that are communicating they're active, and the services that they're using. So services are tied to protocols, right? So for example, I have a web server, right? I know that uses HTTP or HTTPS, right? I might have an FTP server for file transfer to upload and download file for sharing for my company. So scanning like using Wireshark is gonna give you some details about that, right? But if you perform active footprinting, like if you're using Nmap, it's also gonna tell you OS as well, so it interrogate the system and provide you with operating system information. So once you have some information that is relevant, okay, then you would narrow down to what kind of weaknesses they have based on system information, software information, people information. The output of this is a report of what could be as an attack. So, and how they're gonna attack it, that's called the attack vectors. And how someone might exploit the vulnerabilities, the weaknesses on the system and the software. Any question? So in that same section, it gives you information about DNS footprinting. When you DNS footprint, it's gonna give you associated IP addresses to that domain or that DNS. If they have subdomain entries, so subdomain entries are like this. Let's say that that I'm hosted, by Queensland, right? Next, right? Or Nabisco, right? You would have sister branches that the companies own, okay? And they might release different variations of suites or boutiques and so on. So sometimes you would have child domains. So I might have, let's say, arbitrary, we can say Fritolays.com, right? And Frito-Lays, they also own, they're owned by who? Pepsi, right? Isn't that true? That's correct. But because they're two different entities, it's more of a marketing strategy to have two different domains. But let's say that I'm a smaller company, like Frito-Lays, a smaller company. They might have Pepsi.com, but before Pepsi, it would be Frito-Lays.Pepsi.com, right? So when organizations acquire a smaller company, sometimes they would add on the subdomain that way, a child domain. So, or sometimes that it's completely different .com, but it is still a subdomain of the larger umbrella. So when you are digging for DNS, it's going to tell you that publicly. It's going to say, oh, Google is google.com, but they also own youtube.com, they also own this, they also own that, right? So you're gonna say, oh, okay, so now I have alternative ways to be able to hit that target, right? And then we use NSLOOKUP and dig. You guys tried NSLOOKUP before? Sometimes they shield, right? So command prompt will probably be okay for that, right? If you type in NSLOOKUP, it's gonna tell you your current network information, right? And the IP address. And then if you want to see how it doesn't, you go back to your command prompt pop-up. You just type in exit and it comes back to command prompt. Okay, that's how you use NSLOOKUP. I think some of you took my networking class, so you know this. But you can try that at home and see. Okay, so what type of information can be found when you're looking for like DNS information and you're performing DNS cache snooping? So DNS cache is temporary memory if that's something that could be frequently accessed. You know, you hear this all the time. Oh, that data is cached to your computer. So the computer temporarily store it if it needs to quickly reference it again, right? So the information that was recently accessed for the domain names and the associated IP addresses. So accessing that cache information can be important. because it's gonna give us a bigger picture of what other domains or affiliated domain information and the IP addresses that are correlated to them. And when you're performing banner grabbing, you are obtaining operating system information, software information, like Windows server, right? Linux server, Linux releases which one, software version, okay? When you scrape the web or do web scraping, and you see this with data, when you're doing data analysis, you also have to scrape for data. But the type of data that you can obtain from web scraping, you basically obtaining web presence, company product information, if they're publicly available via the internet, the services, employees information, because normally you would see this on like contact us or about us, right? Organization, what kind of things they do or provide, who are the people working, executives or some of the main people listed. So you see that through public information. So web scraping is a faster way for us to pull all of that data at once instead of just like Google Docking or searching through finding things through search engine. And then organizational structure, meaning the hierarchy and ranking of the employees, right? I might have like, the C level, the executive, the chief, and then you might have a management level. So because some company website, they will list like, different levels of employees in their organization. So a lot of that is obtained through the public data. And then we talked about competitive intelligence. Why is this important? Well, gathering information from job listing or job description when company posts, it provides technical information about the company. So I can kind of have an idea of what kind of security measures you have based on the security jobs that your company posts, right? Like your company is looking for someone like maybe a CIO or CSO to be able to do this, and they have to have this type of skills. And so the requirements and the preference on that job listing can give someone some details about the technical needs, right, of that organization. And it also gives us the responsibility, right? And then based on that, we'll be able to see like the vulnerabilities for the organization. So you see IT listings, usually they say, oh, know how to, work with TCP/IP LAN, maybe have preferred knowledge in Cisco, this model, or Microsoft SharePoint. So I would know that, oh, they're using Microsoft SharePoint, right? Or some kind of cloud product, right? I'll give you a break shortly, sorry. Any question? Yes.
Is AWS one of those cloud-based things as well?
Say it again?
AWS.
Uh-huh.
Is it something that we have to get like certified as well?
You don't have to certify, but it should probably be one of those things that you want to do. It's probably suggested that you do. AWS is a common product. It's a company, a service from Amazon that's very common for most company. A lot of people host through AWS because it is very affordable and it's abundantly available. Having certification in AWS will work toward your advantage, but Microsoft is the other competitor. So Azure is, every company has an Outlook account, right? Outlook mail server. So very rare that you would see other mail servers outside of Microsoft because Microsoft been dominating this for a long time. So having Azure, but you don't have to have all the certification in the world. What you should do is you should focus on what you enjoy doing and then capitalize on that niche, right? So if you enjoy doing this area, you should focus on getting some certification to show that you have that expertise. But cloud is definitely here to stay, and it's gonna work toward your advantage. That's my recommendation. Everybody uses it. Okay, let me move this down in case you're still recording 14. Is that okay? And leaving 13 in the last page. Okay, let's talk about 15 and 16. So based on the below scenario, we're gonna identify the social media footprinting technique for each of the scenario. You have a company is searching social media to find education information on a job applicant. You see this a lot. People posting on like LinkedIn or even like their Instagram and so on, like about who they are. So when you apply for a job, either their HR or the company that they hire to do their background, they normally go and find your social media. If you go through clearance, they are going to require you to give them access to some of your accounts, depending on the organization. So, like if we have things that are can negatively impact us as a professional, right, we wanted to start cleaning that up. And so because sometimes things will pop up and you might repost something from like years ago and you thought it would be funny, right? But sometimes that can work negatively towards your future job. But if they're looking for you on social media to verify for job, that is called profile analysis. And then for B, an attacker is examining the CEO's posts, images, and videos on social media website. That is content analysis. So if I'm looking at videos and images, and sometimes this is done for forensic purposes. You guys ever watch those crime, shows where, and documentaries sometimes they have, they show that, maybe a spouse was killed and this is what they were posting, months or days or years before, or weeks before, or hours before, right? So when you're looking at those video and images of that individual that posted, that's called content analysis. And then C, an investigator is examining individual social media comments to determine their emotional state. That's called sentiment analysis, or also content analysis. Like somebody did a bomb threat and then like maybe a day before they might post something that kind of lead to that. So when they investigate the case, they would do content analysis. So in social media footprinting, you might have to do all of that, right? Profile analysis, content analysis. And it says for 16, why is website footprinting important in ethical hacking or pen testing? So we're talking about like a specifically like a website, right, of the company. So let's say that if my target is so-and-so.com, right, I would go to their website. I need to analyze that website to kind of see. So that means that you would have a better understanding of the structure of that website, the components of that website, potential weakness. And that's going to give us a better understanding of the security needs for that company to make sure that they can improve their security solutions or implementation. So when you assess, and so let's say that they contract you and they say, we never had this done before. We want you to be able to start with, something and then give us some details about what we need for security. You can start with their website and take a look at the structure of the website, how it's posted, the content information, the material that goes there. There are security companies that shield things like you can't use state DNS for some of the social media companies. If you're using some of the tools for like Facebook or Meta, right? They have companies that they pay to block that, right? So you do have, additional services that will be available through some of these security firms that way. And then for 17, it says, what type of scans are performed in the second phase of the attacks? So after we have planning and recon, we're gonna move into scanning. Okay, and what kind of tools can we use? Everybody has a network, right? Even on the smaller business. So you would start with vulnerability scanner. Burp Suite is gonna be your best friend. It is better on Windows, and the paid version is actually a lot better than the open. I do a lot of the lab with Burp, but you're limited to the open source version. Before it used to, Swinger is a company, and they used to make features available open source. But because as it got really popular and, they have to maintain the software, they transitioned more of the features to their paid version, which, I think that's fair down the line, but it kind of, it's for like students like you to learn sometimes that probably would not be ideal because you don't want to pay, right? But yeah, you can use the free version to kind of have a better understanding. There are really great tutorials that are provided by the company themselves. So you can go to their website and take a look at the videos on that and then read the documentation. You would use a port scanner like Nmap, Unicorn Scan, Angry IP Scanner. Those are just a few. And then when we do network scanning, we can use Wireshark, OpenVAS or OpenVAS, and ZMAP. And for the Windows version for Nmap, if you want a graphical user interface, you can use ZenMap, and you can go to Nmap website, you can download that. It is a little bit resource heavy, but running it in Linux is great. Almost done. One more. Question? We'll stop at like 7 and then I'll give you a little bit of a break. Okay, for 18, how can an attacker gain unauthorized access to system networks and web application overall, right? We're gonna wrap it up. So first, they will probably make sure that they're equipped with exploitation kits. So these are toolkits. Metasploit is very common. Metasploit been around before Kali Linux became Kali Linux, right? It used to be called Backtrack back in the day when I was or even using it. So Kali Linux came about. That's just a later version of some of the older Linux releases that the community support. But the attacker would then use exploitation kit. There are specific exploitation kits for specific. If you are targeting web servers, there are, Metasploit is kind of like the general, broader, more common one that you see. You can start there. It includes stuff from wireless to the broader spectrum of tools, right? But they build toolkits for different areas, and it is openly available. So if you're targeting certain things, there are toolkits. Sometimes you have to. You can pull it from Git sometimes, or you have to visit certain websites to be able to download it. And then they can use social engineering tactics to get the user to provide information. And then, usually backdoors install once they're already in there. That's in the later phase. So after you scan, then when you move into attack, and to come back to attack is where the backdoor is there. Questions? presentation. So it's kind of overview of what you will be doing, right? We spend a lot of time in Recon. Recon is probably like very important for this field, this area of the field. So, okay, if you're done with this, save your work. Make sure you back it up. You can put it on the USB or your OneDrive or your cloud drive. And then if you want to submit it to Canvas, you can, or you can do that later. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording, so that's for the lecture, and then we'll come back to do the lab. Let's take about a 10-minute break. Get some snacks. If you need to use the restroom. And if you want to also get started, you can download the VM and get started, but let me stop.